I will lead by saying that the topic of sort of the optimal relationship between masculine and feminine forces, both in our inner dynamic, what I call our internal family system, also known as subpersonalities, and in terms of sexual relationships, has been an obsession of mine since I was 13 years old. And in those early days, I thought of it as the relationship between happiness and success. So happiness is the feminine aspect of our being, and success in my world is the masculine aspect of our being. And the idea being that neither is complete without the other. You know, in other words, success without happiness is kind of empty and meaningless, but happiness without success is kind of stressful, you know, if there's no stability to the container or safety. And that's what I want. Now, I could go on this a long time, and I don't want to be boring. So I'm going to ask Rebecca to either interrupt me if I start to blah, blah at the mouth, and or to lead in with what your frame around this is. And then perhaps I might.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I would love to tell a story that I think really demonstrates the idea behind sexual polarity. And when we say sexual polarity, it doesn't necessarily mean male-female genders, because we all have within us masculine, so-called masculine qualities and feminine qualities, or you might say yin and yang, the more outward bound, assertive and mental qualities, and the more internal, fluid, generative qualities. And some of this, so there's a story of Shiva and Shakti, who are Indian. They are gods, a god and goddess in the Indian pantheon. And Shiva is known as the great thinker. He is the mind. And he decides that he goes off into his cave where he meditates for 1,000 years. And he thinks and imagines all the things that the world could be.
I like this guy. Go on.
Yeah, you do, because you and I exemplify this. You are Shiva, right? You're up here, Shiva, thinking of all the thoughts, the abstract. Shakti wants his attention, and she goes to the glen where he's meditating, and he's ignoring her completely. And so she begins to dance around him, because the qualities of Shakti doesn't need power. Shakti is power. It's that primal earth, generative, birthing energy. So she dances around him. She weaves her spell, and even as he continues to meditate, his phallus begins to rise. And she mounts him, and they make love for 1,000 years and birth the world. So that's somewhat the possibilities of that interplay of what we're going to call yin and yang rather than masculine, feminine, right? Yin is Shakti and yang is Shiva. And Shiva without Shakti is just a bunch of words and dusty. But Shakti without Shiva is like a river with no banks. She'll just flood the planet. So the masculine can contain and focus, and the feminine brings life force to the enterprise. How's that?
Wow, thank you, Rebecca. That's very beautiful and very poetic. I'm moved, and you know, I want to also tell you all that I've never presented on this topic before with Rebecca or with anyone, by the way. So I'm both kind of very excited and somewhat apprehensive. So being a primarily masculine person, and I'll explain what that means in a moment. My approach to this is maybe less poetic and more conceptual. All right, and I want to give this frame because this is very powerful. This is not philosophy. This is actually directly actionable, and there's thousands, if not millions, of very successful relationships that are based on an understanding of difference between masculine and feminine archetypes as embodied by men and women. All right. And I want to start with sort of David Deida's ideas. Raise your hand if you've ever heard or read of David Deida. So he was the one who brought sexual polarity into the Western consciousness, shall we say. I'm not saying he may have even invented the word, I'm not sure. So he's sort of the preeminent author on the subject. And he has a very specific idea of it, and his idea is that it's that about roughly, he says, 80% of men have a so-called masculine essence, whereas 80% of women have a feminine essence. And generally speaking, you will be happiest and most productive if you stay most of the time, not always, in your primary essence. All right. So what does that mean exactly? But also, like I say, it's not like a prison sentence. It's not a gender stereotype. It's not like women are feminine and men are masculine. No, you can, there is some choice. There are men who have feminine essences primarily, and there are women who have dominant masculine essences. But the idea is that to have a really successful sexual relationship, a powerful, connected, transformational sexual relationship, it helps and may be essential for each partner to embody these archetypes. And I think this is a really sound idea. I personally don't take any of this as a rule. There's an enormous range of sexual appetites and relationship styles, and I'm not going to tell you, anyone else, or even Deida doesn't tell you or anyone else, like, this is the way you got to do it. However, what I do say, it's very, very important to understand these concepts. All right? Are we good so far, Rebecca? Anything to add to that?
I would like to add, thank you for everything that you said, that Mama Gina is actually the feminine presenter who has brought this idea of masculine, feminine polarity, and how to use that deliberately and consciously. I want to talk a little bit about the science of it, because it's easy to say, well, this is just your bullshit ideas. But if you think about the animal kingdom, males of the species in the mammals have no sexual desire until the female goes into heat. And then a male lion will run 500 miles across the desert in order to find the female in heat. And although we as humans have evolved beyond that, we have these big brains, we can have sex on demand, there is an aspect to that, our biology, that is still hardwired for these sort of heat cycles in the women to spark, heat cycles in the female bodies to spark interest and desire in male bodies. There are other aspects of our biology, our primitive biology, and I happen to know that David is a doctor, so maybe he knows that the composition of our eyes is actually different. And I don't know which one is which. I apologize, but there's rods and there's cones, and men's eyes are actually manufactured to see detail, which is what made them good trackers, whereas women have more of a peripheral scope because they were the gatherers in the tribe. And we'd like to think that we've grown beyond that. There are ways in which we haven't necessarily. And if we're going to function in a way that is different from what we're hardwired for, it's by choice. And we can always choose that. We can choose, I can be as rational and logical as the next person, but life is way more fun for me when I can just be brainstorming and creating and going from this to this to this. I don't like being hemmed in or confined or up in my head. I have a lot more fun when I'm in my body.
Rebecca, I didn't know that. That's very interesting. So I'm aware of the time. I don't want this to be all lecture, because I do want us to circle, essentially, provided you guys are in agreement with it. But I do want to really kind of give you sort of the core concepts here. And just as a heads up, I have a sort of a long article podcast, which is called What Women Want Towards a New Psychology of Love, Sex, and Gender Relations, that goes into these distinctions much deeper. And also my book, As Lovers Do, Sexual and Romantic Partnership as a Path to Transformation, goes into these distinctions much deeper. But the What Women Want article is, it's a complete expression of my ideas that are sort of a combination of David Deida and a number of other teachers. So to get to the point here, Deida says that people have a preferred polarity, and that the deepest and most transformational sexual relationships happen between people who are inhabiting these polarities. But what are these polarities, right? So the feminine archetype, according to Deida, is the magnification of love, right? The magnification of love. So a person in a feminine polarity essentially seeks to attract love. So she tries to make herself attractive in every possible way, right? But not necessarily for the purpose of just like consuming the love. This is called the devouring feminine, but for the purpose of kind of sending it back. All right. So so a person in a feminine polarity seeks to attract love and also gives it very freely, typically, if she's fully in her polarity and if she's a sort of a more mature feminine polarity, right? And the problem that arises in relationships, again, this is very, very practical, guys, and I really want you to get this, is that most men don't have the quality of attention or of emotional presence to fully satisfy a woman in her feminine polarity. All right, a woman in a polarity, she basically wants attention. She wants love. She wants quality attention, meaning attention that whose purpose is to see and empower the love object, as opposed to attention that's unrelated to her at all, that's just annoying, right? Okay. And most men just don't have that quality of attention. It's partly because we're not hardwired, and it's partly because we're not educated. That's the problem, essentially. So typically we men learn to love from women, and we learn to be present from women. I was basically an idiot before I met Rebecca, seriously. All right? Seriously.
He's right.
So what women do instead, since they can't get the quality of attention from the masculine partners that they desire, is they get into a power struggle with them. And that essentially kills the relationship. And there's, I go into that in depth in what women want. All right. So I won't go in there. So let's just kind of fast forward to, the masculine archetype. So the masculine archetype is, well, I personally think of masculine and feminine as different styles of loving. So the feminine style of loving is essentially giving attention, caring, conversation. Whereas the masculine style of loving tends to be in the nature of practical service. All right. So masculine people, they want to solve problems, and they particularly want to solve women's problems. All right. And this is another very, very important aspect of being feminine in a sexually polarized relationship, is that when you realize that a man's deepest desire is to support you and make you happy, and when you are able to support and validate him for doing the smallest baby steps in that direction, right, it's going to blow your relationship out of the water, right? So that's the basic context. I'm sure there's a couple more things I might think of within a minute. Do you have anything to add to that, Rebecca?
No, yes, I do. And let me just think for a minute.
Actually, while you're thinking, let me complete. There is one more thing. So I'm going to give you David Deida's test. Now, Deida is one of the people who talks about sexual polarity, but many, many people have done it before him. I don't know if John Gray, Martin Venus. It's a whole system based on sexual polarity. It's not as evolved or as mature as Deida's, but it's a whole system based on sexual polarity. There's a woman called Pat Allen, or Patricia Allen, wrote a famous book called Getting to I Do, which is also basically, sexual polarity 101. So, there's lots of people who write about this. So according to Deida, the masculine goal is freedom, and the feminine goal is love. And it's a little bit more complicated than that, but that's not far from the truth, all right? Because it's true that the masculine goal is freedom, could be freedom from some constraint or some problem that you're trying to resolve. That's the masculine delight, is to solve problems. And, Deida's test for whether you're masculine or feminine, and I'm going to actually ask you this question and ask you to answer that question, is which is more important to you? To accomplish your mission in this lifetime, or to be loved? Which is more important, to accomplish your mission in this lifetime or to be loved? And Patricia Allen's test, whether you're masculine or feminine, I think is actually better, is it more important for you to be respected, or is it more important for you to be cherished?
Well, and also, you know, you said, is it more important to mission or to be loved? And yet, and many people make their mission to be loved. So, you know,
I mean,
it's kind of a trick question. I think that another way to put it is that when you are in masculine essence, in the masculine pole, you want to be recognized for what you do. And when you're in the feminine pole, you want to be recognized for who you be, or for what you be.
Which correlates to respect. Which correlates to respect versus cherishing, right?
Well, I mean, but it doesn't, because that's what the feminine pole is about being. So yes, it's cherishing, but there's an aspect of wanting to be respected as well for who we be. So one of the most profound exercises actually that I've seen, you see what happens is that you say men don't have the quality of attention, but what I found is that men give women what they themselves want, and women give men what they themselves want, rather than recognizing that there's actually some very different core needs. And so for men to recognize a woman's beauty, to tell her when she's looking good, to tell her she's looking good even if she thinks she's looking like crap. You know, I think that is, as a feminine person, one of my longings is to, you know, be cherished and loved even if I know I'm being evil and awful or PMSy or men like to solve problems, but they like the problems to be solvable. And one of the things that women have kind of been taught, well, and first of all, I want to say this. I'm reporting what I've experienced personally and what I've witnessed. But if it doesn't feel resonant or true for you, throw it out. This is really descriptive and not prescriptive, what we're giving you. And I want you to just, you know, get in the habit of doing this and then take it out in the world and try it out and see if it works, see what it creates. So giving the opposite sex what we ourselves want. Oh, and that I was taught that if you wanted something done for you, if you wanted a man to do something, you figured out what he was doing wrong and you nagged him until you got him to do it right and to do it your way, which is horribly counterproductive for us as women. And so a much better strategy, and we'll talk about this more in dating strategies, is to show an appreciation, to give them problems they can solve, and to acknowledge. Men are hideously under-acknowledged in this culture, actually. You know, I once went up to a security guard at a mall and asked him, I just walked up to him and I said, hey, would you be my hero and tell me where the restroom is? And this guy just lit up. And not only did he tell me, he then walked me to make sure that I didn't get lost. And the whole way I was like, you are such a doll. Thank you so much. I feel so taken care of, you know, and my girlfriend was standing next to me with her jaw like, because, you know, it was fun. It was fabulous. I mean, even telling the story, I mean, I feel like I had sex with that guy. I didn't have sex with that guy, but it was as fun as that, almost. So man buffing, very important. For women, for men, being willing to, yes, pay attention, name what you see, and be acknowledging. You know, women don't want to be told that they did a good job. We don't want a vacuum cleaner for our anniversary. You know, we want it to be told, wow, you look really sexy in that dress.
And or just like, I'm so enjoying your presence right now, your beauty, you're so wonderful. I love you put out. There's various ways of acknowledging a woman. That, you know, the most powerful acknowledgement for a woman is acknowledging her presence, or her, you know, how she shows up. Whereas the most powerful acknowledgement for a man is acknowledging his production. You know, how competent he is. You know, how much you trust him and validate his way of being and thinking. Well, you know, just keep on talking. You know, that was a beautiful story, by the way, Rebecca. I totally lit up myself just hearing it.
Thank you.
You know, and thank you for a beautiful demonstration of sexual polarity in action. You know, this is again, I've said 1,000 times, this is not a philosophy. Okay, this is a practice.
Right. Well, and I just want to mention that the flip side of this is that where men go when they're doubting is they doubt their production, and women doubt their attractiveness. And I think we heard that actually. We go into the I'm too fat, I'm too old, I'm too, and if I could just tell you, honey, you are too skinny to get married in Samoa. So, a lot of the doubts that we that all of us basically have about how we look and what our bodies are like are based on we love to pick measuring sticks that we fail against. Instead of, this is about authentic dating, right? What does it mean to date authentically? It means to recognize that this is what I got. And you know what? It's pretty good, and I'm just going to find the person who likes what I got.